All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome here to the IREPAS trader session. In preparation of this trader session, SteelOrbis has sent an email to all of the participants registered and giving the chance to raise questions, which then SteelOrbis has put in a compressed form to us, and we have already discussed those questions here on the panel in preparation for this meeting now. And I'm not sure if all of you have these questions in front of you, so we're just going to go through question by question, and I just start with the first one. The EU market is still way behind consumption figures of pre-2008 numbers, but still only few production corrections happened. Temp steel is gone, Liepāja is gone, Corrugados Aspetia is gone, but still it is not enough to bring the market into balance. What are the existing EU mills doing to balance the market better and to avoid this harsh competition amongst European mills? That was one of the questions which came in different forms, manifold. So I think it's still a big question mark for the traders to see what are the mills doing, especially in Europe, but also including, of course, Turkey. What are the mills doing to bring consumption and production into balance? And we have heard this morning from Kim Marty that the European 27 production quantity is 14.1 million tons, out of which actually just 10 million is utilized. That means we are at around 71% utilization of capacity, which of course is not good for a mill. And since those are average figures, we can presume that those in Germany are probably having a much bigger utilization of about 85, some even 90 to 95%, and others in other regions, and probably particularly in the southern regions like Spain and Italy and Greece, they probably just going to reach between 50 and lower levels. So I think for this question to answer, it would be good to have mills representatives here who would probably tell us better whether there are still ways and means to reduce the capacity even further, at which state of a reduction it is literally not feasible anymore to produce steel and rebars with a profit, because the fixed cost will not make you competitive anymore. But other than that, does anyone from the audience has an idea of what could be done and what could be arranged in order to bring consumption and production into a more balanced situation?
I have a comment. I don't think that the European utilization rate is even at 70%. I have a feeling that it's a lot lower, and from what I understand, they're working with 2 shifts, which means that makes it 66% at best that their capacity, and I think the utilization if you include Turkey, is much higher. And but still, it's probably less than 90%.
Any other comment? Well, the next question is literally the same, called utilization ratio of EU steel hoovers around 70%, and any hope for an increase above 80%, i.e. any capacity closures or significant improve in demand. Well, from my perspective, a significant improve of demand in Europe I can hardly see for the next coming 4 or 5 years, whatever, but I really don't see any country in Europe which has plans and the money for respective infrastructure projects which would literally help to boost up the consumption. The private sector also still suffers a lot, especially here in Spain, as we all know. There is still an enormous amount of unsold houses and apartments. And I think the first what we're going to see, if the economy will improve into better, is that those which is already turnkey produced and ready for instant takeover, this will be sold first, and then eventually developers will consider to go into new projects. And as I said, most of the states do not simply have funds in order to invest in new infrastructures. Certainly some are having very much the need of improving that. And coming from Germany, I can tell you our highways definitely need to be improved. Our bridges, especially in North Rhine-Westphalia, there is such a backlog of work to be done that probably every second bridge has to be renewed within the next 2 to 3 years. Or severely, renovated. So there is demand for that, but there is simply no money. We have decided to consolidate our budget and not to make more debts. So I think the same situation we have in most of the European countries. So from my perspective, I don't see demand is going to drive up and going to improve the utilization. Will mills go out of the market? Big question mark, but honestly, in Europe, I don't see it either. What we see is that the present situation is going on now for years, and if anyone would have been out of or would have the intention to go out of business, he would have done it already. But I think we probably passed the worst phase of this market situation and this development from coming from very high numbers down to very low numbers. So I think those who survived so far probably will have the ways and means also to continue. Is there any other opinion or anyone who would disagree or agree in whatever sense? So that's not the case. Third question, also very similar. What is a prediction about overcapacity in Europe and how they can be best handled? Will production move out of Europe in the long term? Well, in long term, yes, the chances are definitely there. I don't see it in short and medium term. But what we've also seen is that the emerging markets like Algeria and so on, more and more capacities are being installed there. New lines are being introduced, capacities are building up. And honestly, if we hear what mills like Tosyali and Qatar Steel are having in mind with Algeria, it would not wonder if pretty soon Algeria will be self-sufficient, maybe even exporting, but something is probably going to happen that they will try to get out of the 15% duty advantage of European mills. And that will be another bad case for the European producers, because Algeria, especially for Spanish market, Italian producers, and also Greek producers is a big market still. So,
well, for years the overcapacity in Europe has been exported. So Europe could produce more than its demand, and the rest could have been exported. You know, like you, Alf was saying, to North Africa, and including all the way to the U.S. When you see this capacity increases in the Middle East and North Africa, obviously there will be a less chance for Europe to export its overcapacity. So there will have to be some capacity reductions or some mills going out of business. So when will that happen? Probably not in the very near term, but it will happen because current capacities are not sustainable.
I can add just one word that Europe has a different demographic outlook in the next 25 years than North America, Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And the population growth, it's a known fact that younger people use more steel than older people, and Europe is becoming an older place. So the European steel industry is going to have to adapt itself after the present situation and demand, as an opinion.
Yeah,
That's a very good point.
good point, very good point, and yeah, I think certainly we are in Europe's pretty well developed in all sense. So what we see in emerging markets on increasing demand, like infrastructure, housing, hospitals, schools, and stuff like that, this is all existing in Europe. So we just talk about replacement, but not new investments. And as you correctly said, we are not a increasing nation, nowhere in Europe, so it will be limited also by capita.
And it's also Europe is easily accessible from the neighboring countries, you know, like Turkey or even now in North Africa. So you may see the reverse of the exports going back into Europe, which will put even more pressure on the European mills in existence.
Any other comment from your side? Then I go on to the next question, which came from the audience. How do you see prices of steel in general this year and the next 2 to 3 years in Europe? Wow.
I think we should ask them first.
That is something which I just pass on to the audience, actually, because I think a steel trader is happy to predict the price for the next months, maybe next quarter, but for 2 to 3 years, I'm sorry, I'm at my limit.
Well, there's a lot of smart people here, and I think that, you know, you don't have to be correct, but you probably do have an opinion, and I think that the consensus of the opinion do count. So I would appreciate your voice and tell us what you think the future is.
Any idea?
Yeah.
Thank you. Francisco Quiroga, CNF International. Well, today we heard Salah Martin talking about the situation in China. And China is a big player in terms of the demand for the products, also in terms of the sourcing. So if there is some kind of, let's not say collapse, but a reduction in the dynamic of the Chinese market, then that will point to reduction of prices for steel. I think that alone would be an important element.
Thank you. There was one.
Tom?
It's Europe, we're talking about Europe.
No, it's good.
No.
Go ahead.
Well, in Europe, yeah. Well, okay, it was said in Europe, but we can put this question international. It's a general question.
Okay. Yeah, I can't speak to Europe specifically, but I think it'll be driven simply by what comes out of Asia. If 60 or 70% of production of long products sits in Asia, they will dictate, I think, the global market price. And the only thing to stop them is
Sanctions.
International trade cases, because their goal is to export at the end of the day and to find homes for their steel. And they don't necessarily market the product versus pure trading, and that's a different philosophy. So that, I think, along with raw material prices, will dictate where steel prices go in the future. So
Actually, you're very right. At the end of the day, there is a minimum cost that's involved. So the prices can decrease, but there is a bottom, and that bottom is the cost of basically the scrap, or the cost of iron ore, or really the cost of energy to produce the steel. So I think really the subject is really the prices can go up and down. We as traders are more interested in our margins. I think what's really going down is the margins. And I have a feeling that everyone here has experienced that the margins that we used to enjoy do not exist anymore. So that's probably even more interesting to watch, and probably for all of us to decide to do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, the margin is definitely something which every trader concerns, and in fact we discussed it in the preparation meeting that for a trader the price ultimately is a little bit irrelevant. Of course, if the price doubles, okay, your credit limit and the tonnage you can do with the customer is limiting. But in the end of the day, if you make, let's say, the same percentage of margin on that, it turns out to be the same. But yeah, the margin pressure, I think, is on everybody, and despite the lowest interest rates we have in Europe ever, still it is extremely difficult and expensive to market steel with long payment terms, because yeah, it's a question of credit insurance and a matter of internal interest rates which the company is charging, because you don't get it at the rate of LIBOR like the banks. So the banks are still making a huge profit on the interests, while we as steel traders and also the mills, they really do not have a benefit from that.
I'd like to add a point to remind everybody about the role of international logistics in this kind of forecasting. If you go back 10 years, let's say that we bought steel for $400 and it was a quantity of, say, 10,000 tons, and we paid $60 in freight. Today, let's say that steel prices are $600 and we pay $35 in freight for half the quantity. So this is a situation where everyone that produces steel can logistically move the steel to a market that has a short-term demand at a very efficient cost. And so there's the speaker this morning talked about the dislocation within small regions versus that the rest of the world is becoming more and more alike. And logistics is one of the things that is underpinning the situation that prices in China can very much be the prices in Peru and vice versa. That's because of logistics. So if we look at why are logistics cheap, well, the amount of global trade in all commodities has not picked up from the 2008 level, except for certain things like iron ore going from Australia to Brazil, which is now more efficiently moved than it has ever been before, because now the vessels are all 125,000 tons and up, and the freight rate is half of what it was before. So these are all concerns that have to be included in the forecasting of where prices are going to be in the future. So sometimes we have presentations by shipping companies at these events that say there's going to be a shortage of vessels in the Black Sea. In 2 years' time, there's going to be a shortage of dry bulk vessels in 4 years, and whether there's going to be enough vessels to handle the business that we as traders can develop internationally 4 years from now is impossible to forecast.
Well, Michael, there's an overcapacity in logistics. I mean, in the vessels, obviously, the logistics is not making money. The traders are not making money. When you talk to the mills, they claim they don't make money. I just wonder who makes the money. And what? That's good.
We have a question here from the man in the brilliantly white shirt and red tie.
Yeah, it works. Yes, just a question. Although I'm Raymond Powell from Vollers from Belgium, I have just a question for you guys. Is in how far does the conversion rate of the dollar is playing a role in the prices for Western Europe? Because we are all dealing in euro here in Western Europe. But what's the influence of the exchange rate of the dollar in the prices?
I think it has a serious influence. I mean, if we're looking at the prices, the increments, it makes a big difference because the typical scrap is purchased on euros. So when euro value goes up, you will see that the price in dollars will go up. So it depends really how you look at the pricing. If you look at the pricing in dollars, which most of us do, then when you see the value of euro going up, you will see that the prices do go up. So it does have serious effect on it, but overall in the concept of it, really it's not that. It is the demand and it is the supply, and our main problem today is oversupply of money and oversupply of products, both.
Thank you.
So, let's move on to the next question, which came from the audience. After Poland successfully implemented measures to avoid VAT fraud, it looks that other EU mills have taken over this job from Liepaja. Strange bits activities can be observed from Slovakian mills, and it looks like somebody copied the model for some Eastern EU markets. How are those markets reacting, and is Brussels aware about it? Does anyone has ever heard about this VAT fraud, which went on for quite some time, and what Poland has made on that, or are you not so much aware? So let me give you a little introduction. What happened is that if you do inner European triangular business, you can sell rebars and wire rod and all other products from a EU mill to a EU customer without charging or without paying VAT in the country of origin. But if there is a customer then in between who has his location, let's say in Poland, he is buying the steel without VAT. What happened is he sold this material to another customer in Poland, charging him VAT. So he got 19% more of money, and by the time he was due to pay that to the government, he just declared bankruptcy and run away. And that happened in hundreds of cases where companies were just formed just for this one particular reason, to buy steel without VAT, selling it with VAT, and to run away and to close the shop by the time the first tax officers wants to check your books. So that was a real burden for the Polish steel industry, and we know that all the three, which is Celsa, CMC, and ArcelorMittal, that they heavily complained to the government, and finally they made an arrangement that only the last one in the row, meaning the construction company, is going to pay the VAT to the government and nobody else in the row. But this is not the case yet in countries like Slovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, and so on. And so it looks like that material is now being offered into Germany, into Netherlands, into Poland again, into Slovakia, coming from mills somewhere in Europe, again with the same model. So have you ever experienced a similar problem like that people or your customers have told you he got a price which is almost 100 years cheaper than what you are offering, and you wonder why and what? Obviously not. So I think, Michael, you said that there is this so-called EIORI number, which honestly was something new for me either. Can you just explain what that means?
I think that for everyone here in this room, we should be very careful not to do triangular business involving a European Union country that has VAT, which they all do, and that is ultimately you can be held responsible if someone else doesn't do what they're supposed to do. And since VAT is running in between 15 and 23%, it's obviously more than our profit. So we suggest everyone to be very vigilant on this. There are no freebies. If it's too cheap to be true, then it's usually too cheap to get involved in.
Yeah, so some of my customers told me about cases like that, and they were of the opinion, well, we pay this guy VAT, so we are fine. What's the problem? Let me buy this cheap steel from this guy. But I can only warn, because if the government and the tax officer is of the opinion that this price was so low because something is a little bit shaky, that you have to make sure, and you have to investigate if this company you are dealing with is really VAT registered, is having track records on VAT. Otherwise, it can end up that you have to pay the VAT twice. So, if this is an issue for you, we can, or is there any question on that, or is this? Okay. So, next question, coming to Turkey. What happened finally with the anti-dumping procedures in the US against rebars? Any final decision yet? I would like to give over to Don or Michael or...
Well, Bernd really had a nice presentation this morning. I think it was clear that, we're waiting for the results in April 18. Obviously, there's a surge of rebar coming to the US, and the quantities are really incredible, so we'll see how this will work it out. But Bernd had more information on this.
Just let me say, no, there is no final decision yet. The date that is important to me, and should be important to everyone here, is April 18th. That's when they make the preliminary anti-dumping decision on Turkish wire rod, and the final countervailing duty decision on Turkish wire rod, as well as the preliminary anti-dumping decision on Mexican rebars. I'm sorry, I said wire rod before, on rebars. So April 18th is an important date, and all kinds of numbers are swirling around what it could be and might be, but the truth is that nobody really knows. I mentioned before this morning that the Turks do have a good experience with dumping suits in rebars and wire rod too. I think it's the third or fourth rebar dumping case in the last 12 years or so. So they know the drill. They've done it before, and when they tell me, oh, we expect X amount, I put a certain kind of credence to it. So, but as I said, April 18th, we have to watch.
Well, I asked one of the Turkish mills, I said, why are you shipping large quantities after the case is filed? Won't that go behind you? And why are you dumping in that sense? And the guy answered really logically. He says, look, we're only selling with letters of credit. So obviously there's a buyer in the US who's willing to speculate and take that cargo. So we're only selling what's been asked from us. So don't look at us, look at your own traders. And it has some valid point there.
Yeah. It's also interesting for me as a trader that as the anti-dumping investigation has been progressing, that the Turks, they had deadlines, self-imposed deadlines, or deadlines that were guided by the investigations. The dates were pushed out because of various factors. So at one time we had a deadline, anything that comes in here before January 20th, or February something, or March something. And now it's April, or then, now it was April 18th. And now I see the Turkish rebar mills, they're offering May and June arrival. And they're the importer of records. They're taking over the risks. So that tells you a little bit what they expect, or don't expect. Yeah. Right. They're all preliminary. Yeah. April 18th is preliminary. I mean, I want to be very clear about it in case I said final. April 18th is the preliminary ruling on dumping by the Department of Commerce against Turkish rebars. And it is and Mexico too. And then in August, they have the final decision. And then in September, the ITC, the International Trade Commission, they have to confirm it all. I mean, it could very well be the Department of Commerce, whose rules and criteria are a little bit different from the ITC. The Department of Commerce will announce all kinds of things. It can all be shut down or amended by the ITC in September.
Well, the petitioners did it unto themselves. They extended for another 60 days, which was totally stupid. But anyway, and they're paying for it. And the second thing I'm going to say is, fortunately or unfortunately, depending how you look at it, the cost of steel production, rebar production in Turkey is a lot lower than what they are selling, number one. Number two, what they're selling in their domestic market is actually higher. So really, they're not worried about they're selling, put it this way, they're selling into the U.S. at much higher prices than what they're selling in their domestic country. So chances are they're not going to have any dumping, found in this. That's probably what they're thinking about.
Yeah, but still, it's conjecture at this point. I still think that the Turkish mills are very brave people. They're taking over a huge risk, in my opinion. And the rules have changed a little bit. I don't want to bore anybody here with all the minutiae of trade laws, but the rules have changed insofar that when you were caught in these dumping penalties, that until the final ITC ruling is out, you just had to open a bond. That was okay. But now, as soon as the DOC says there is a preliminary dumping of X amount, you have to pay. I mean, the government changed the rules. They want to have the cash. And at one time they have to pay you back or not pay you back. But in the past it was not easy, I shouldn't say it, but it didn't have an impact on your cash flow because you had a bond. And now you have to actually pay. And I was very surprised when I found out about it, when we looked into it, that they changed the rulings, I think, the rules last year.
And one other rule that has changed, which probably eventually is going to make a big impact, is in the past, if you were found to be dumping, and if the next 3 years, if you do not dump, and you prove that you haven't been dumping or you have zero margins for the next 3 years, you would basically go home free and you will have zero dumping going forward. Well, they have revoked that, which means now that if any one mill is found to be dumping, they have to prove that they're not dumping every time, every year, and it's very expensive process, very expensive. So I don't know how long a mill can stand to do that, provided they ship mega quantities, so they can justify the cost of attorneys and all that. So it's going to be a different ball game going forward.
Yeah, and I did mention this in my presentation this morning, but I would like to add it for some people who are interested in how it works in the U.S. We had very recently, a ruling on preliminary dumping against all country tubular goods, OCTG. And one of the main culprits, according to the domestic mills, was Korea, South Korea. And they were let off the hook. There was zero dumping in the preliminary ruling against Korea. The petitioners, the domestic U.S. mills, didn't like it. They had a fit. There was a week and a half ago, there was a committee meeting in the U.S. House of Representatives where all the heavyweights of the U.S. mills, the chairman of ArcelorMittal, of Nucor, and Leo Gerard, my particular friend of the United Steel Workers Union, they were there, and man, did they raise a stink. I mean, they had words like us. They described the situation like, we have to ring the fire alarm, the house is burning, the foreigners are taking over, our steel not taking over, the foreigners are destroying our steel industry, and all in all. And it got relatively prominent, it was relatively prominently reported in the general media as well as in our steel media. So there is a lot of hype about these trade laws right now, and I just didn't like it when all these people could make the case pro-dumping and nobody was there to point out the opposite side. And there are a lot of reasons why the domestic mills are not always right in their dumping suits.
So let's move on to the next question. Spread between Turkish scrap costs and Ukrainian/Russian ore-based billets is very small, recently getting smaller. Comments? Question mark. Can anyone from this panel say something to that?
Generally speaking, the last 2 years, Turkey has become a substantial importer of billets from the Black Sea. And one of the speakers earlier today mentioned a figure of 2 million tons last year. And obviously this means that the Turkish-based electric arc furnace mills are producing less billets and to be resold into primarily the people who are making merchant bars in Turkey. And the reason why they're not doing that is because the cost of production with a reasonable return for the Turkish mills is lower than, or is higher than what the Ukrainian billet price for billets are for the same re-rolling mills in Turkey. And if you figure that the scrap price has reached $370 CNF Turkey from the United States, and the billet price in the Ukraine is around $490, and if you add, say, a reasonable return of what the Turkish mills are looking for is $150 a metric ton, that means that it's more economical to import billets than to produce them yourself. And that is something that's driving the marketplace. Obviously, if Turkey had substantially lower scrap prices, then also the prices for billets from Ukraine and Russia would also be substantially lower, because that would be a market-making event. So we're not living in a static environment. Things will change in a very geometric and arithmetic way. So it's not certain that if scrap prices go down, that the billet price or the billet equation from Black Sea will be improved or be less attractive for the people who are buying. Personally, I believe that the supply of billets from iron ore production into Turkey is a phenomenon that will last for several years to come.
Any comments from the audience? Then we move on. Next question from the audience was, what is expected from the Algerian market? With new capacities popping up locally and new investments in planning, will Algeria disappear from the import landscape of European mills? I think I briefly answered that question already on the first part of the question we raised here on reduced capacities and utilization of capacities. I think everybody will be clear that with new capacities popping up so close to the European community market, that this will naturally have an effect, and naturally it will be to the disadvantage of mills which usually and traditionally supplied and used Algeria as an export market. So to what extent the Algerian government will assist and help those investments with imposing new tariffs and duties, or maybe even cancel the duty-free import from European mills, which is an advantage of 15% compared to Turkish mills. This is just a question we cannot answer yet, but talking to people who are very familiar with the Algerian market, they think that after the election in Algeria has passed, probably they will try to impose something or correct free import from European steel. So the capacities which we hear are from Tosiali. Sorry? Okay. Can we have a microphone there, please?
My name's Leo Rawlins. I work for Tata International. I just wanted to make a couple of points on the Algerian market. I mean, I'm chiefly active in flat products in Algeria, and we've already seen on hot rolled coil at the beginning of the year the rescinding of 15% duty. So we've seen the entry of CIS mills on hot rolled, whereas prior to that we were really head-to-head with ArcelorMittal on hot rolled coil. We're still competitive. We remain competitive. You may argue that the dynamics of hot rolled are slightly different to rebar and wire rod, but for the moment, anyway, we remain competitive. And also, it's important to consider that the quality that a customer can get from a European hot rolled material gives them certain advantages on their lines with respect to yield and all the rest of it. The second point I wanted to make was with regards to the reliability of production of the Algerian domestic industry. Again, my experience is chiefly with regards to flat rolled material, but what we see with flat rolled producers in Algeria, limited that they are, is that we can provide, as traders this time, rather than manufacturers, we can provide more reliable service for galvanized coil, or I should say alu-zinc coil, for Algeria, than the domestic producers. Why is that? Well, I mean, it's very, very tricky place to produce steel. The supply of electricity is irregular, patchy at best, depending on where your production site is, and the power on the production side, as I think Mr. Toscelik has found in the last year, still largely lies with the labor force, with the workers. So it's, yes, with the capacities coming online, it will be more and more challenging for European producers, especially, if they rescind the duty. But I don't think you should underestimate just how much of a challenge it is for Algerian producers to actually get product out the door. And the big distributors on the ground, the majority of them, they actually prefer to import material because they know they're going to get their product on time, and they actually are getting more favorable payment terms from intermediaries.
Yeah, thank you very much. Does anyone know the consumption figures of Algeria for reinforcing bars? Does anyone have an idea? Because it's not my market area, so I really haven't.
I think a good guess is 2 million tons. A good guess, 2 million tons. Unless someone else
Could well be. Do you know? Algeria is very complicated, as you pointed out. There's a huge consumption, but it's very tricky. And for the field, even though there is going to be production, as there are feed, there means there is none of that. And there's going to be the rainfall. But still, the quantity being imported regularly are very, very high. And this is not going to stop. Because the project, the housing is constantly growing. So this is going to be. Sorry, we forgot to get your microphone, so.
While we wait, I agree the situation for the Algerian government, who ultimately can make a change in the import duty, is more important for them to continue having a viable construction industry, to build low-cost housing and make substantial improvements, because the rebar coefficient of the cost of the housing is very small.
Yes, they have what they call the logement social, which is cheap housing, because there's a huge part of the population which is not living in, decent standards, we can say. And the figures, we think it's between 2 and 3 million tons at least, depending on the years and on their project. You knew that up to 2008, 2009, there was the highway project, which was get a lot of steel, so.
Thank you.
Any other comment? Well, so we move on. A huge question came up here for the Crimea crisis. What is the impact of Russian-Ukrainian tension on steel trading in the EU? Maybe I put two questions. What kind of impact will the EU association with Ukraine have on imports of steel, in particular longs for the EU? Will pressure go from east to west? Any idea from the audience on that question?
Well, obviously, U.S. is going to put some sanctions, but so far it's limited to certain individuals from Russia and Ukraine, and that doesn't have any bite. So it is possible that they're going to have to think about new methods or to impose some sanctions, and it is going to disturb the trade. So if you're doing a trade with Russia to United States or to Europe, you really have to take some precautions, because it's going to affect your business.
The next question was, Ukraine has threatened to confiscate Russian-owned assets in Ukraine to compensate for Ukraine assets in Crimea. Some steel mills, iron ore mines, coal mines are on that list. What will happen? Pre-financing of exports from Ukraine are no longer possible with insurance. Production is running presently from February payments for March shipments. Force majeure will be declared, whether real or not. Problems start in April.
Does anyone in the audience do business with Ukraine that had some effect in their trade when they're buying to their own country? How about shipping terms? Do you think that you have some effects on the shipping terms because of the ports being blocked at all?
I just wanted to add a little bit here. We are doing business with Ukraine in special steels, and that has not had any impact yet. I mean, we are careful enough that we have in all our purchase and sales orders a clause now that would hold us harmless in case of any sanctions, but the mills in the Ukraine keep on supplying. Payment terms haven't changed. It's not letter of credit. It hasn't changed. So far, it's normal.
Okay, then Another very long question. AIIS, American Institute of International Steel, reported the following. First, the March 20th executive order gives the President Obama very broad authority to apply sector-specific sanctions in steel and other areas. Second, the March 20th executive order makes clear that any such sanction would apply notwithstanding any contract entered into or any license or permit granted prior to the effective date of this order. What this language means is that any sanction under the executive order would apply to all license contracts and permits, even though those license contracts and permit are issued or entered into force, the executive order was issued. Given the extreme broad latitude contained in the executive order, the future economic sanctions involve steel-related transactions aimed at Russia, including sanctions affected pre-exist contracts. AIIS members should proceed with caution with respect to engaging in such transaction and should conduct all appropriate due diligence commands, question mark.
Very good. That's a good speech.
Was it a speech or a question?
Well, I guess in short you can say that because of the crime area situation, there will be a disruption in trade. And one of which is obviously there is possible that the U.S. government can impose a sanction and you cannot probably, or you will be prohibited to import at that time. But the second and probably just as important, what's going on is the banking, the financing of things. The Ukrainian mills have difficulty in getting financing, and looks like the Russian mills or traders will have the same difficulty with the international banking community. So if you're doing business with Ukraine, Russia, you will see some disruption in your trade, so you really have to take some precautions and start insuring your receivables or your trade.
Like just to make a funny story that I heard on CNN, that 3 days after the population of Crimea voted to become independent and then become part of Russia, people went to their local ATM machines and found out there were no more Ukrainian currency in them. And then they got mad and called the Ukrainian bank. So people do what they normally do and they forget about why things actually work. And one of the problems for Ukrainian steel industry going forward, and the iron ore industry and the coal industry, is that their government was almost broke, but now they are broke. And number two is that Western banks were working with the European Development Bank and other international IMF and so forth in order to support the Ukrainian industry. Well, this is all now in a big pause. So the industries in Ukraine that have been working with borrowed money or money that has been paid by pre-financing, they of course have forgotten why they got that pre-financing or why they received those loans from Western Europe. And so people are in for lots of surprises. And now, for example, it will maybe take the Russians 6 months to put in Russian ATM machines in Ukraine.
Yeah, all the infrastructure. I mean, it's also the fact that the Crimean Peninsula got the electricity or gets the electricity and their water supply from the Ukraine. This cannot be changed overnight. I mean, the whole thing is a mess.
And what we read is just because you have an irrevocable letter of credit, just don't depend on it because they may have clause in it that says that, you know, when there is a sanctions with the U.S. government or European community, that trade may not happen. So the fact that you have a firm letter of credit, irrevocable letter of credit in your hand may not mean much at that time.
Any comment from the audience? So next question also about Ukraine. Ukraine VAT is 20%. Will any of the exporters expect to get something back from a broke government?
In the future.
In the future.
With the devalued money.
That's good.
Yeah. So we move over to China. Steel oversupply in China. Is there any hope for a slower supply growth due to environmental issues and producers' low profitability? I think we discussed this already yesterday, so maybe Michael and Bernd, if you give some comments on that.
We've already talked this morning and this afternoon about the oversupply situation in Europe, in the European 27, which is estimated in between 50 and 60 million tons. Frankly speaking, the oversupply situation in China is not as grave as it is in the European 27. So it's like throwing stones when you're living in a glass house. Let's just say that we don't all believe the numbers in China, but let's say that the total products of finished steel that are produced in China in 2013 are about 720 million tons. And the official export statistics of China were, I think, for 64 million tons exported, which obviously we all realize is less than 10%. And there is not 50 million tons of steel laying around in China that is going to be scrapped in 2 or 3 years. So the consumption versus the production inside China is much more imbalanced than it is in the EU 27. So yes, I think it is worrying about future oversupply in China because there are still more investments for hot roll plate mills, there are still more investments for section mills, and there are still more coating facilities that are in boxes waiting to be put up. I believe very strongly that the rate of increase in capacity in China is going to abate over the next couple of years, not for any other reason besides pollution controls, which are more paramount in Beijing today, because people are learning to complain to the government, and blast furnaces will be closed, blast furnaces will be opened up. It's a period of adjustment for China. And as long as China doesn't export more than 10% of its production, I think we can all survive. But if, for example, export pricing were to become dramatically more profitable for the Chinese mills, then obviously they have a capacity to probably export another 60 million tons of steel, which would place it somewhere around 15-16%. But then again, that's about the same level that the EU exports per year, or slightly more than what the United States exports per year. So it's a relative figure, but obviously we all know that China is the elephant in the room, and we're all scared about having our feet stepped on by the elephant. But the elephant only has 4 legs.
Well, I think the environmental issue is real, and the Chinese are really paying attention to the environmental issue, but there's limited things that they can do in the short term. On one account, there are some mills getting pushed out of the business, and due to some profitability, because they have old technology. I have seen mills that literally heat their steel with coal shoveled into the furnace. So you're talking about some really old technology that they have. But these mills gradually do go out of business. But the same owners get the subsidy or get the financing from their banks and build new mills. So as fast as the old mills are going out of business, new capacity, probably even a bigger capacity with newer technology, is getting into the market. So really, you do not expect the Chinese capacity to go away anytime soon.
Any comments from your side? Then we move on to the next question. Theoretical weight rebars is becoming the norm in domestic China, but the future markets is on actual weight basis. More and more fraud is uncovered on minus tolerance in rebars around the world. China rebar to EU norms is priced $100 less on FOB basis compared to EU origin, or vice versa scrap. Any thoughts on that? Michael, that was partly from you?
Pardon?
That was partly from you, or?
Excuse me, I was taking care of a business here that came up.
The theoretical
Yeah, the theoretical weight, yes. I thought I would just point out to the people here, you read a lot of information about the Shanghai rebar futures market. And most people know that the RMB is ranging between 610 and 615 per dollar. And you see that the futures contract is going up 10 RMB, down 50 RMB, up 20 RMB, and so forth. But all those prices, when you make the calculation and remove the VAT, those are actual weight numbers. That's how it's quoted on the Shanghai futures market. Whereas, from my understanding, the majority, maybe 51%, maybe 75% of rebars that are sold now in China are sold to theoretical weight basis. So there's a disparity between the prices that you hear about transaction prices and what you read about the Shanghai futures market. And this does cause some confusion. And in China, because Don was talking about the old antiquated mills, I think everyone who's been in China for 20 years, we've visited a lot of hand mills, a lot of cross-country mills that are making rebars. Some of them are still in operation, but these people, they are taking the benefit of the market going towards theoretical weight by rolling rebars that have minus 9%, minus 10% tolerances. And a lot of these rebars are sold without VAT, delivered to construction projects as black money and so forth. And so this is also driving the market. It makes the off-market rebars profitable and the on-market rebar not profitable.
Well, Michael, I think it will distort the statistics for sure, because when you know how you measure it with a theoretical weight or actual weight will distort it. But in reality, you can never stop the fraud. I mean, fraud will always happen in certain countries. But I don't think that they can export to Europe or even to Middle East and below the norms theoretical weight. So if the tolerance, let's say, is 6.5%, like in ASTM is 615, I don't think that they can ship in 7 or 8% below the nominal to the US or I don't know what the norm is in Europe, probably that. So really it is internal and it really doesn't affect overall trade, and it just probably will distort the statistics, that's all.
Yeah, I also think the theoretical weight, respectively the minus rolling tolerance, will not be really an issue in European countries and also not in America or in Canada, because I think the markets will be too keen to check really what they are getting and what material is arriving, and they will make random tests, and I think the Chinese mills cannot afford to bring material into Europe or into America or even into areas which are CARES approved, like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and these regions, and to roll this material so light that you even have already a different dimension rather than what you have sold. So I think they have to follow the market, and they can stay within the limits of the standard, but otherwise they risk to get the CARES certificate cancelled, or, well, they would definitely get all other certificates cancelled. So I think inside China, eventually there is something which they can do, but also the technicians on the job site have to be very careful that they use the steel which is supposed to be installed on the job site. So, coming to the next question, protectionism is a headline. What are thoughts on dumping and safeguard petitions around the world? There were 35 last year against China alone. Anti-dumping protection of EU on wire rod imports will expire in August, and in the EU likely to continue this measure? Question mark. Does anyone want to comment on the safeguard petitions on China? I think probably most of them are in America. Yeah, we have spoken on it.
Yeah. There's a correction that the wire rod dumping case expires in May, not in August, in Europe.
In May, yeah.
Yes, in May.
Yeah. Bern had nice presentation on this one this morning, but I would like to say that really These protections really temporarily changes things, but at the end of the day, there's so much you can do to protect your industry in the long term. You can probably go for years to stop the inflow of trade, but it's coming to a point where the anti-dumping has been used too often. I think I was looking at the statistics recently, and I was surprised to find that the most cases that was filed was in India, and of course the most cases filed on the subject is steel. I think steel is the number one anti-dumping case, and obviously it's big industry, and it's eventually. These things are not going to hold water, and like they did in the pipe case, and Bernd was just mentioning, it's so true. The OCTG, the dumping case that the U.S. was implementing, and everybody really counted on it and waited for Korea which is 90% of the imports, to stop bringing to the U.S. And there were so many stories about it, and everybody did their futures business depending on it. And guess what? Korea got zero, and everybody's disappointed. So, things are changing. Eventually, you really have to look at your numbers and try to make business that makes sense.
Well, on the anti-dumping protection of EU against Chinese wire rod, I can say that a notice of impending expiring was issued on November 1st last year. The duty will expire, according to that, on 6th of August this year, if no objections from EU producers will be applied. So if the EU producers will submit a request for a review, then a sunset review will be taken up, and this will probably last about another 15 months till a final judgment is known on that. So I think to import wire rod from China into Europe is most probably not possible for another 2 years. So, coming on to the next question, Michael, do you want to take over this raw material part? Because I think you had some comments yesterday on that.
In 2013, I believe that the average CNF free-out 62% iron ore contract price was $135 a ton. And we've all seen that the prices have dropped down to right now it's around $111, $112 a ton, which is a substantial decrease. The good news is that the European producers are also taking advantage of that in their new contracts with Brazil and Australia. And since the euro is quite strong, obviously they have a double benefit, the European steel industry.
What percent of the iron ore is controlled by these big three? I just don't know. Do you know?
More than 70%.
So I'm just curious, if you control 70% of the world trade, how do you let the prices go down? I just don't understand. Is there any reason?
Yeah. No,
No,
Don,
but inventory of iron ore is earth. It's sitting there.
The answer is that iron ore production is a process industry. It's not a batch industry. And once you're digging iron ore in Brazil today that is going to be delivered in China in November.
No, but you can stop
So
shipments.
no, you can't, because you own the vessels. If their vessels aren't traveling, you have a cost. You own the railroad line, which you've invested billions of dollars. I mean, the iron ore is, before, historically, it was free. You basically got a license to dig it out, but you have to invest a huge amount of money in order to get it out of the ground, process it, rail it to a port, and ship it.
Frankly, when iron ore was controlled by only five companies, I thought that this is going down the drain, the price is going to go skyrocketing. And now you're saying down to 3 and they can't still control. I don't understand. Something must be fishing and coming in the future that we will be surprised. I would not count on the long-term low prices because at the end of the day, it's Earth. They can stop. They don't. It doesn't rot. You know, it's been there. So all they have to do is just wait a while and then excavate and put it in the market. And the vessels that they own, I mean, if you look at the profit margins that they're losing, it's not as much. So it is really a futuristically dangerous situation, I think, when you have such only 3 companies to control the whole world.
Yeah, but I think Tom made a very good point. I mean, yes, there are only a handful of players in the iron ore business, in the global iron ore business, but China is the single biggest buyer. And when they overbuy, they walk away from it. They've done it years ago with billets, but they don't buy billets anymore. So they just walk away. I read a number, there are 90 million tons of iron ore lying around in Chinese ports. You know,
3 million tons last month.
Okay, well, mine is dated than my number, but it's an enormous amount. And yeah, and that's the question. I think that's why the iron ore price, even though it's only a handful of players, a few players, they cannot control it. I mean, they were happy to sell to China, and when it turns around there.
China has iron ore, but it's the lower quality. So if they want to, they can use their own. In fact, from what I understand, time to time, that's what they do. Again, I don't know, and I think it's more expensive. Well, that's true. That's for the time being. I guess that's the upper limit is the Chinese production. And that makes sense. But it still is, like I say, when you have such large commodity being controlled with only few, it is a dangerous, futuristically dangerous position.
You can take out Chinese citizenship because that's what the Chinese steel mills are trying to say right now.
Well, they're right.
Shall we go on with traders? Or? Okay. So now the most important question. A lot has changed since the crisis, and the role of the trader is being redefined in the process. What do participants see this role to be, thereby creating a sustainable future for ourselves? Ladies and gentlemen, now I need answers.
We have no answers. So I think the question is, I mean, is there a continuing role for traders? Are we an extinct species, or will we survive?
I think maybe it can be combined with the next one, which is also very interesting question or command, saying the amount of newsletters from all sorts of companies is getting scary. The informations in some of those daily newsletters are so accurate that it is really destroying the know-how advantage of an international operating trader. How to handle that? So I saw some fellows are sitting here left from my side. So yeah, I think the function of a trader definitely changed a lot dramatically over the last years. I was just having a lunch with a befriended competitor, and I told him a story about an explosion of a blast furnace in Venezuela some 25 years ago, and just because our man was there and he had the big explosion and he had a telephone nearby, he was calling, and we got the information that there will be a demand of slabs pretty soon. An enormous amount of slab. So this was published just 7 days later in Metal Bulletin Anywhere. So that means we had a 7 days advantage to buy slabs like crazy, and we could make an advantage. But today you have this information probably within 5 minutes after that explosion on everybody's desk, on everybody's smartphone, which is dramatically changing the real know-how advantage and even timely advantage. So I think it was Mark Rich once who said, When everybody is sending a telex, I send a fax. If everybody's sending a fax, I telephone. And if everyone is telephoning, I'm already on the spot. So this advantage he always used, and that obviously worked for him pretty fine. But yeah, what is the new role?
Yeah. Well, I think there's an evolution in our business. And we used to bank on knowing the information ahead of time, or having a relationship with the mills and the mills' capabilities much better and their capacities and so on and so forth. That used to be our banking. This is how we used to really use our knowledge for the trade. That has really evaporated as in the information age. In today's age, all of the things that we just mentioned are known, and it's out there, and all you have to do is Google it. You can get just as much information, and the rest you can, if you subscribe to Metal Bulletin or SteelOrbis and whatnot, you can get the rest of the information. So really, we have to look for what else are we going to do, and how are we going to survive. And one of the things that comes to my mind, if you don't add value, you will disappear. So in the trade, we have to add value, and I hope to God that adding value will not be taking the risk of the bad debt of certain customers. We have to be not the financiers of the business. We should have still the banks do the financing, and our adding value should be more than that. But meanwhile, to survive, to add value, you have to have margins. And what's going on is we traders are really buying for 100 and selling for 101 and thinking that we make money. And we just don't understand that this is not sustainable. Eventually, if we continue to do that, we're going to hurt each other and probably all disappear. The only way to survive is, first, you have to make money. If the business is not profitable, it's not going to be sustainable. So to do that, obviously, we have to find ways to show that we are viable and we have something that we can offer to our clients. And each one of us should be a niche company. We, in our company, Siwa, we had a long time ago decided that we're not going to just do the drop shipping and we can survive in the market like that. So we tried to be a niche company for certain products, and on those products we do add value. The customer come to us not because we have the product just like the others, but we have something that the others don't, and that will make the difference.
I just wanted to say as well that I have no problem with the accurate information that person referred to. As long as the information in these newsletters is accurate, I have no problem with that. But I spend a lot of time to set my customers right when the information is not accurate. And there's an awful lot about it, particularly about Turkish rebars in the past few weeks. And that's where the problem lies. And it's not SteelOrbis, when some outlets in the US come out with stuff that is totally ignorant. That's the problem. The accurate information is fine.
Do any one of you have some ideas that can share with all of us that how we should proceed in the future? Any ideas?
I'll just make a comment. I think when I started in the trading business, there was X amount of tons produced in the world, and then there was X amount of those tons that were free traded outside the country of origin. And I think every year since then, there's been more of both. So there's enough steel floating around the world. It's just how do we get to it, and how do we make money doing that? And I think with these things, it's changed the whole process. And I think as managers and directors of our companies, the single thing we have to look at is, one, the relationships we have with buyers or customers, but two, the productivity of the individual trader.
I like to say that there are two key words in trading: passion and curiosity. And for those who can maintain that drive throughout their careers, the trading business is a wonderful business. I recommend it to my friends if you have those two attributes. Because there is a service that we can supply to customers, consumers, and producers.
Well, it's nice to see passion make money.
And I'd like to, there were lots of questions. Do we think if market prices go up or down? That's not the issue. The issue is what Tom alluded to, I think. Do we make margin? Okay, I mean, it doesn't make much sense to just turn over the money. We have to make a little bit of a margin, and that's, I think, our biggest challenge. It's not...
Yeah, I think we have to make a margin, but the individual trader within the group has to make the margin.
Of course, I mean, that's...
So you can't have 10 traders and 2 of them carrying 80% of the weight.
Well...
And then you move on. I'm just saying as a global group, you know, you have to, we're all individual businesses at the end of the day.
Yeah, but
because it's relationship
do you ever walk away from a business that you know you can make 1%, but it's not good enough for you, so you say, I'm not going to do it? Do you ever do that? If you do that, then you have a future. If you just sit down and say, well, so-and-so is giving that, so I'm going to just beat that, I'm going to just go ahead and do it, that is eventually going to be your end. I think.
Yeah,
there is a point where you have to sit down and calculate whatever it is that your company is going to survive, and not only for today, for the future. So you've got to have to sit down and calculate what your margin should be and what your volume should be. So anything less, you really have to have the discipline to say, sorry, I'm not going to do it, let somebody else do it. And the guys who do it, maybe better than you are. Maybe they work with better margins because they have better cost than you are. But chances are, I know most of you guys are just as good traders as the other. So probably they don't. Probably they're just surviving and just making the day pass by and looking for another day to survive that eventually is going to suffer. So there's a time that you really have to just say, no, I'm not going to do it for that. And sorry, that's not the way I'm going to do business.
All right, we are out of questions that were turned in, so anything else from the floor?
Well, in any case, we see that on this IREPAS we have 313 registered participants. The vast majority are traders, so I think still a lot of them are seeing a function and at least generate that much profit that they can afford to pay these fees to attend. And yeah, it is certainly a constant battle, and certainly for big organizations, it's also a constant dialogue with banks, with financing arms of what should be done best. Is it better to move volume with small profits? Is it better to go only on profit? I think this each of us has to answer individually because of individual circumstances in the group. Even if you are on your own, you have other priorities on your list than if you are responsible for hundreds or thousands of people. So I think everyone is making his own assumptions of what is best for him. So I think we are pretty much at the end. No, there is one last question. Steel trading companies are not doing as well as oil and metal trading companies. What's the reason? Can we put this together in what we said already before, or Dr. Pura, any comment on that? Can we have a microphone over there?
Nope.
Oh, yeah, okay. This gentleman and then the one.
Hi, my name is Demir Dülger. I'm from SMR. I mean, I have a question about the previous subject. I mean, my question is that what are the values that a trader can give to a business in steel, according to you? I mean, we have talked about, Mr. Michael Setteral talked about passion, curiosity, you can say finance, and what other? after you.
I can tell you this, gentlemen. When your client buys from you at a certain price, we live in the future. Today, you're probably offering material for June, July. Okay? So the future is 4 months, sometimes 6 months, sometimes even longer. Okay? In a way, when they buy from you, they're hedging with you. Okay? So when you're doing hedging, what is the most important thing? Who you hedge with. Can that intermediary, which is you, survive with that? Imagine that they're buying from you for an X price, let's say $600. And 6 months from now, the prices go up to $900. Will they still get the material? So you have to make your customer understand that there is a difference between you and the other trader who's working out of his bedroom, have no assets, cannot carry any liability. So guess what? When the prices go up, he's just going to disappear. So you have to remind your customer every day that there is a reason why STEMCOR is there. There is a reason why SEBA is there. These guys, or any one of us really, any one of us here, we all exist because when things change, we can still deliver. And not only that, and this is only the prices. Price is not the only thing. When you're shipping cargo between the oceans, so many things happen. I had a vessel stolen. I have a vessel that hit the shore. I have a vessel that hit the Panama Canal. These are all expensive things. And somebody has to stand and make sure the customer still gets the material at the same price without being affected with all that. Not everybody can do that. So when they bring you another fact sheet or prices from XYZ company, and look at that company and say, hey, I'm not going to compete with that. That is not how I can compete. Now, if you think that in 6 months you can really get delivery when the conditions change, then go ahead and do that trade. Because when everything stands the same or market does not move much, it is easy to do all that. But when things start moving and market becomes volatile, then when you will see the product. It just goes both ways. When the prices go down, there's an issue too. So it really, you do add value, one of which is that, of course. There's more things I can say. There is a reason why you exist, and just on the trade side, I'm talking about just the trade. Okay, so the product, you know, when we talk about the product, I know that rebar is not a sophisticated part of the steel anymore, but the quality of the product, you just guys mentioned about the tolerances. I mean, do you really verify that your customer is really getting, you know, within the tolerance, within the ASTM or whatever the tolerance you're using? All of these are verified by good traders. So you add value other than the financing and all that. You do add value, and you have to explain that to your customers every day. And if they're willing to buy from someone in China in a bedroom who will disappear as soon as the prices move, then be it. Let them just do that. Let them do that. You just don't have to participate in that trade because that customer have not been educated. Partly your mistake. You should educate your customers, but have not been educated on it. So steel is not really, I mean, we look at it as commodity. Unfortunately, rebar in a way is, but still, I've seen rebar that people will take and it will just hit on the floor and it will shatter and break. You know, all these things happen, and so there is a reason why you exist, and part of which is obviously the quality, obviously delivery. So these are many things that you have to educate your customers so they understand why you exist. They understand that they have to have you, otherwise they are taking a serious risk.
Can we get the microphone to Dr. Puro, please?
Siegfried Purer from company Elsner. So we are all complaining about the Mickey Mouse margins, what margin we are earning, which is unfortunately a very much justified complaint. But are we not all guilty that these margins are so small in a moment? When we get an inquiry from a customer and we get an offer from a mill on an FOB basis, we add the freight, the expenses and a small margin. And nevertheless, the customer will tell us that we are far away from the best offers which he has in his hands. And from where are the best offers coming? Not from his fantasy, but from a competitor. So from another trading company. So, and how do we want to speculate in these days? When we are selling today, the customer expects from us that we are shipping, let's say, 15th of April, and if we are lucky, end of April. So, even if we think the price is going down, we have practically no chance to make use and to play it as a short position, because we have to cover this position within a very short period of time. Otherwise, we would not be in a position to supply the goods within the contractual period. And if the price is really going down and we are late, then we have to ask the customer to extend the LC, which he will do in case we give him a price reduction. So the only one position what we can run is a long position. But who really thinks now that the prices will go up in the next months? And when we're looking back to the last 4 or 5 years, maybe during 9 months of a year, the prices went down, and during 3 months, the prices were either stable or going up slightly. So a long position is from the very beginning, in most of the cases, a negative position. In our trading company, we are not only trading with steel products, but also with chemical products and with oil products. And when we make in these products the same calculation, FOB price plus freight plus expenses plus margin, maybe the customer tells us, look, your price is not so bad, but 1-2% you have to reduce it. So obviously in this field, the traders are not so interested in speculating, are more trying to do a business on a reasonable basis. So what is the reason that we as steel traders are so speculative? I really do not know. But in a moment, our function has been completely changed. Years ago, the trader was the one who knew the market, who knew the product, who knew the freight rates, who knew the production program of each mill, and with this knowledge, we could do something and earn money. Today, our function is limited to financing and to speculation. On the financing, the banks are not really supporting us because they're all afraid to support somebody in the steel trading or in the steel industry in general, so the speculation remains with us. And here I think we have to change our approach and not to be so aggressive as we all have been in the past.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying, though. You should not be just the speculator of the market. You should not consider yourself just the speculator of the market. You should look into what other things you can do and not only do, convince your customer that there is a reason why it exists. And really, the delivery is an important thing. I mean, I guess you all remember 2004 when the prices almost doubled. I mean, look at how many people really delivered at that time with the old contracts. So you have to remind your customers. I'm sure they will remember 2004 and the other crisis that they go through. So really, if you're just going to sit down and speculate and think you're going to be in the market, you know, when you look at the time periods that you speculate, chances are, and this is something we discussed yesterday, that you will be wrong because the prices will come down, you know, as much as it goes up. And in fact, if in last 1 year, if you were speculating, you probably are losing money. So that should not be our role at all, actually. It is the customer Your customer should be the speculator, because your customer is the one who's benefiting from the futures price, not you. You are selling whatever the price that they're today. If you're selling for June, X price, come June, you're going to deliver at that price. So if that time period, if the price is higher, then your customer is benefiting. You're not. So you're just basically giving your upside directly to the customer. So why are you speculating? Why are you taking the downside and giving the upside? Anyway, these are the things that we were talking yesterday. That's why we just brought it up to you all. I don't think there's an easy solution. I think this will all take time, but eventually we're going to have to really think about our positions in this business, in this market, and make our own decisions so we can survive in this business.
Any more comments to that? So then I say thank you very much for your for being present here, for listening, and not having got to sleep. So I wish you a nice evening in the Barcelona stadium. For all who are coming to that, it should be extremely nice. I was told they make individual tours in groups of 50 or 60 people, so you can really have a nice view on the stadium. And maybe Mr. Messi is going to take our tickets before we enter, so have fun. Thank you. Bye-bye.